What's up? Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here. I would like to welcome us all to Chamberland, where the weather is always sunny, where the business community is always happy, and our communities are always aligned, looking towards the future with complete unity. You know that's all BS, right? That's Chamberland. That's the chamber version of things. But the truth is, we are in a crazy cakes time, y'all. I mean, just since I hit the bar last night here, one of my colleagues told me that in their region, 5 chamber CEOs have been fired in like the last couple of months. I heard somebody on our Horizon 2 task force told me, like we always do check-ins, talking about the Horizon 2 project, and one of our members said, hey, we just got asked by one of our local businesses to take a stand on an issue which they would absolutely be canceled for, but they were like, but if you do it, we could hide behind your apron, you know? And so the things that are being asked of us as chamber leaders and the things that are needed in our communities are kind of off the charts. So I want to invite you into a slightly different kind of a conversation during this keynote. So, man, these tracks of breakouts are amazing. You're picking up so much value, asking such good questions about the, sort of the nooks and crannies, the programs and the ways of thinking that your peers are using to elevate themselves and their communities. And that is critical. But I'm going to ask you to step back off the desk, away from your communities, and I want us to have sort of widen the aperture here and have a slightly different kind of a conversation. And this is what I mean. I've met a lot of smart leaders, a lot of smart leaders. But this time calls not just for smart leaders, this time calls for wise leaders. And here's what I think the difference is. If you look at this image, right, it's the waves rolling up onto the shore. On the top of an ocean, you can see some of the diamond glittery wave action. And I think of those as the sort of the domain of smartness, because in your communities, what this looks like is today's headline, or today's social media fight, or today's issue, the issue du jour. And those end up feeling a little bit like cluster ball in our communities, right? Like, now here's today's issue, oh, it moved over there, there's tomorrow's issue, right? And it takes a lot of smarts to be able to navigate all of those changes that everybody can see on the surface. But as a futurist and as an economist, as a macroeconomist, I like to widen the aperture and think much more deeply. Deeply. There are things underneath the surface of the waves that drive those waves, things like the tides, things like currents. And what I want us to enter into today is a conversation about a series of deeper trends, deeper currents that are driving what you're seeing on the surface. And it's my belief, after doing this for 26 years, that if you as leaders understand the deeper drivers of change, then the stuff you deal with on the surface is like, oh yeah, that. We could have anticipated that. So are you with me? You ready to go? 5 trends, 10 years, buckle up, let's let it rip! Trend number 1 is churn. Churn is the sheer force of people moving from job to job, moving from job to entrepreneurship, moving from job to retirement, sometimes like David, back to a job, right? It's the sheer force of people leaving your city and going to a different community, sometimes state to state movement, and now we're starting to see people actually leaving the country, right? So churn is the sheer force of people moving. I think Jamie Henning is in the audience, and we worked with her former city manager, Raymond. He was called to the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard for 1 month for sort of a boot camp for new CEOs. He had just become the city manager in Greeley, Colorado, so he was gone for the entire month of July. When he came back from that program, I was like, Raymond, like, what did you learn from your month at the Kennedy School with all these other new CEOs of cities and counties? And he said, Rebecca, people are moving. They are moving. So let's do a real quick show of hands here. Just think about your staff, your chamber staff. And could I see a show of hands for anybody who, let's say the last 2 years, you've had an unplanned rotation of talent? Anybody have an unplanned? Okay, good. Now, next question is going to be this one. We're going to start to narrow this down, and I'm going to just run it like an auctioneer. How many of you have had more than 10% of your staff turnover in the last 2 years? Put your hand up, keep your hand up, keep your hand up. How many of you have had more than 30% of your staff turnover in the last 2 years? Keep your hand up, keep your hand up. Has anybody had more than 50% of your staff turnover in the last? Okay, keep your hand up if you want a drink. Everybody look around. These poor fools need a drink. Whoo, Lord, you're still standing though. That's what I want to remind you. You're still standing after all this time. 4 data points. Some of these are sort of on the wave level. We're going to go a little bit deeper. In October 2023, Challenger Grain Christmas reported that in the first 9 months of 2023, there were more CEO resignations than in the prior 20 years of reporting. CEO resignations at an all-time high. Brookings came out with a statistic that said, hey, guess what? We're 900,000 people short in the labor market compared to projections. Some of this was because of COVID deaths, but a lot of it is from people either leaving the workforce or unable to return for some of the structural reasons that you all are working on in your communities. This is a big number, right? This is a lot of help wanted signs is what this is. And when I think about this number, I think, all right, well, looking at your current staff or who you've got, what if this is it? You know, what if you're not going to be able to hire that next big hire? What if you have to make do with what is? Sherry Ann got at this next slide. It's one of my favorites as an economist. This just makes my heart like effervescent. The number of high propensity business applications, we've never seen it higher. Now, in the short term, these high propensity businesses, HBAs, the US Census Bureau sort of, creates their alphabet soup. High propensity businesses are very likely to add additional payroll. Right? So compared to all the EINs, like my aunt right now, she's 88, and she just got an EIN because she's going to start to take in people's tailoring work because she's a hell of a seamstress. Aunt Carol is not going to create jobs, right? But these people are. These people are going to create jobs. Now, in the short term, this is going to make other businesses a little bit nervous because they're trying to hire people too. But in the long run, this is what makes America great. It is an oxygenated entrepreneurial system where people can start jobs, start businesses, disrupt the status quo. It's going to be long run great for our communities. Now, the fourth and final stat I want to bring to you around churn is, I'm not going to lie, it's my favorite. And Bob, former executive of Boise, Idaho, he confirmed that Gavin Newsom did win the real estate award for the entire state of Idaho recently because in 2020 and in 2022, U-Haul ran out of one-way moving trucks leaving California. Now, some of that stuff is on the wave level, but you can feel how that will have a ripple effect on your communities. So I want to actually ask you a deeper question about churn in your communities. And you're going to need both hands possibly for this. Let me start with this. Put your left hand in the air if you are saying hello to a lot of new people moving into your community. Left hand up. Okay, you can drop your hands. Put your right hand up if you are waving goodbye to a lot of people leaving your communities. Let me see right hands. Now let me ask both questions at the same time because some of you have a lot of people moving in and a lot of people leaving. So once again, left hand up if a lot of people are coming in, right hand up if a lot of people are losing, everybody up. Let me just look. Okay, those of you who have both hands up right now are like, I wish one arm was longer than the other. Now, let's just take it for example. Let's say you've got 3,000 new people moving in a year, and you've got 2,000 people leaving in a year. The labor economist, what would the labor economist tell you that means? You're up 1,000. Congratulations, net increase. That's smart, but it's not wise. Here's what's wise. When we talk about churn, you've got a difference of 5,000 different people coming in and out of your community. Those 3,000 people who are coming in our illustration, are bringing with them their values, their norms, their ways of doing things. And the 2,000 people who are leaving are taking a piece of your community with them. The way that your community does things, your norms, your values, because the truth is that culture walks on 2 feet. So the net for your communities is that churn is going to affect some of you in small ways and some of you in very big ways, because these bigger tidal shifts of people moving in and moving out, 3,000 in and 2,000 out is not a net 1,000. It is 5,000 different sets of values, some leaving, some coming in. Now, this might be great news if you are at a chamber where you're like, we need a personality transplant over here. But if not managed, this could be even more divisive in your communities. Okay? So this is churn, the sheer force of lots of people moving. Trend 2 is not a number. Trend 2 is not a number, it's a color, brown, specifically brownouts. Brownouts. So let's do a quick show of hands. Just thinking about your own person right now. So whatever's in your pockets, whatever's in your backpack or your bag. How many of you right now are carrying at least 2 electrical devices? Stuff you have to plug in for it to work. Anybody? Okay, keep your hand up if you've got more than 3. Okay, wow, that seems to be a real dividing marker here. Anybody have 4 or more? You guys are the ones who carry the smartphone of 2 varieties, the life-work balance right in the pocket, right? Okay, I'm feeling you. I'm feeling you. Yep, exactly. So now I want you to, just consider that our grid, this electrical grid, is one of the oldest machines in America. And it powers more and more of our lives. It's more and more required. I mean, when you are asked, would you rather give up coffee, chocolate, or your smartphone? Yeah, oh, I heard you. Okay, I see that. Okay. So our electronics, we're so dependent on our electronics. But I want you to imagine this. Imagine that tonight, after we find out who our award winners are, congratulations to all of our nominees. After we find out who our award winners are, you go to bed. Right? You go to bed, and if you're like me, you put your cell phone near your bed, right? Now imagine you wake up in the night, because it's hot in Dallas right now. You wake up in the night, you're like, I'm so hot. You kick your covers off, no relief, you're still hot. So you get up and you look at your bedside table, and you can't see the alarm number. There's no time that you can see on the bedside table, so you pick up your phone and you notice it hasn't been charging. So less battery, but now you can see what the time is. It's about 3:30. You're like, what the heck's going on? So you go to your window at your hotel room, and you open up the window pane, and you see this. No lights outside your window. The only lights are emergency lights and headlights. So now you're like turning on your flashlight on your smartphone, and you're like, where's the landline? Thank God for the landline. Call down to the front desk, ring, 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 ring. It's just ring and ring and ring, and nobody's picking up. You're like, what is going on? Finally, a call, the phone gets answered. Can I help you? Hey, yeah, I don't seem to have electricity in my room. Yep, the whole hotel is blacked out. We're going to get back up on generations soon, but what we recommend is, some of you who have lived through this, what do you do first? Water. Fill up all your water bottles, right? Fill up all your water bottles. Right? Put your phone on low power mode, But if you want to try to catch up with what's happening with the local utility, their outage map is up there, and that's the best way to stay up to date on when they're expecting that will come back online. And then you hear this: if you leave your room, please don't lock your room. Please find a way to jimmy your door open, or you can always swap your lock over so that your door can't lock all the way, because we're not sure how long our fobs are going to last. So don't lock yourself out of your room. And you're like, but it's so hot. Oh yeah, maybe you want to try to walk down and get some ice out of the ice dispenser so that you can at least have some cold water. We really don't know when we're going to be back up. Now, some of you might think, ugh, Rebecca, this is, you weird futurist. This is never going to happen. Here's the leading indicator, you guys. Every year, all of our utility companies have to do their projection for their base load, what they think their base load is going to be. And for the last 20 years, 0.5% increase in the projected loads. 0.5%, why? Because we're getting far more energy efficient. We can't buy a utility or an appliance that doesn't have the Energy Star certification. We're doing better with how we manage our energy. But the new 5-year loads say an 81% increase in forecasted demand. Utilities are freaking out. They're freaking out because this was unanticipated. Data centers, the electrification of the economy, the huge industrial mega projects are putting so much load demand on. And the utilities themselves aren't made to adjust at this level of speed, right? It takes a long time to create generation and to create transmission. So over the course of the next decade, more of our communities are going to be affected by brownouts because we simply do not have the ability to scale up for what will be needed. So brown is this imbalance between electricity supply and demand. Trend number 3, buckle up. This is a doozy. I call this trend homing because it is all about how we think about, build, set policy for housing. Now, I am not talking in this case about the unhoused. I am talking about the homes needed to meet demand, which is an eye-watering 7 million homes. That's today. This is not a projection, you guys. We need 7 million homes today. I was working in a large and growing city in the Southeast, and I was looking at the data for the number of homes they need, which is about 1,500 a week, and the number that get approved each week, which is about 150. This is like an impossible numeric challenge. And that number of 7 million does not include the people who are, need to be rehoused because they're going through a climate disaster. It doesn't include the people who are starting to migrate naturally due to extreme weather and climate events and lack of being able to, insure their homes. How many of you, just out of curiosity, how many of you live in a region where home insurance is becoming harder or more expensive to get? Anybody? You guys are living this right now. So on top, both hands up in the air, I love it. On top of that 7 million, we've got all of these other considerations for the houses that we're gonna need. Now, just to put this in perspective, in the 1980s, we had a $1 billion climate event about once every 4 months, so about 3 times a year. Now, we are having one every 3 weeks. A 17x increase in billion-dollar events. Right? So it's kind of a hard time to be in insurance right now, to be in commercial insurance right now. But, let me ask you a real quick show of hands. How many of your chambers right now are actively playing a role in the housing issue? Actively. Okay, that's a lot of us. Now, for those of you who didn't put your hand up, how many of you think you're gonna be playing a role over the course of the next 12 to 16 months? Most of us, okay. I have spent a lot of time thinking about this issue and how we solve it at scale. So I'm bringing for you 3 vectors of how we can scale this, along with a whole bunch of best practices. Just a tiny little side note. Have you noticed that like the chains on our name tags, it's like there's this beautiful little like jingly sound? Yes, in the background. It feels like a tiny amount of applause. I love it. So here are the three vectors of change around homing. Zoning, the speed of building. I mean, listen, I built a home in 2004, and it took about the same amount of time to build that home as it took my parents to build their home in 1972. Something is wrong. When all of us, I mean, you can now use your thumb to get a mortgage, but it takes 18 months, same as it did years ago, to build a home. So speed of building is another vector. And then the final thing, and this is one that might cause you to reframe this, but I actually think if we could rethink housing, we could get a co-benefit of it for some of our most vulnerable populations. So let's go. Let's talk about zoning first. For anybody I've worked with in the past 5 years, you've seen this chart, right? The idea that we have this missing middle housing. What do I mean by this? In most of our communities, we have a bias towards single-family housing. To illustrate this, I want to tell you a story about Southwest Airlines. And you might be saying, Rebecca, we're talking about housing. Why are we going to talk about airplanes? As one of my favorite econ professors used to say, just stick with me. I'm going to knit it all together at the end, okay? Another Texas company, great Texas company. Southwest Airlines did not fly a plane for 20 years after it was founded. Why? Because for 20 years, they were in litigation with the federal government, and the FAA, and this was the argument. Southwest would show up at a hearing and they would say, we believe there's a market for inexpensive leisure airfare. And the people on the committee would say, no, there's no market for cheap leisure travel. If there was, the other airlines would be offering it. The other airlines were offering business class travel, mostly business travel. Southwest would come back and say, well, no, that's not true. That's actually a false, because they'd have to take less money. There would be less profit in it. There's a reason why the bigs don't provide low-cost leisure travel. And it went back and forth like this. Southwest saying, there's a market for it. And the Feds saying, there isn't. If there was, the bigs would be doing it. 20 years of that before the first Southwest airplane took off. And if I had $1 for every P&Z meeting I've been in your communities where I have heard this very same argument but at a different scale, it goes like this. Residents and developers say, we need more multifamily housing. And the P&Z committee, most of whom live in single-family homes, so there's a little bit of like a bias there, right? Like, this is what their normal is. They say, oh, we don't think there's a market for this, because if there was, we would have other developers doing this, and back and forth they go. So what we're missing is this idea of missing middle housing. And I know for some people, they're like, oh, anytime you talk about density, people worry about crime, right? But you guys, this missing middle housing can be absolutely beautiful. Duplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, multiplexes, and then of course live work. These are the kinds of places any of us will be proud to live in. So who's doing it? Several years ago, Minneapolis dropped zoning for single-family homes. You can no longer zone in a neighborhood for a single-family home in Minneapolis. So what happened? 2s and 3, duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes popped up, and what happened as a result is their housing stock went up 12% over just a 5-year period. Here in Texas, Houston did something similar. They had a requirement on the books that said the minimum lot size for a single-family home has to be 4,000 square feet. They dropped it to 1,400 square feet minimum lot size. They had so many homes like this one that got built that it actually stopped the escalation of rental prices. So what happens when we start thinking a little bit more creatively about what is zoned and what isn't zoned? Now let's talk a bit about the speed of building. The speed of building. So on the far left here, you have homes that are built remotely and then shipped in. right? So these are, I think this is called zip homes on the far left. In the center there, that is a flat pack home. So if any of you have ever been to IKEA, all the furniture at IKEA is sold in flat packs. Turns out you can order a house that way, right? Can you imagine how much time and how many Allen wrenches would be required to put this kind of a home up, right? So, but the beautiful thing about these two options, right, the home that's built off-site and moved in place, kind of like a modular home, and a flat pack home, the beauty of it is there's far less waste. These can be very efficiently done. They're being done in huge warehouses, or they're all weather contained. You don't have to worry about if the weather's bad on the site, the job stops momentarily. So less waste, more efficiency, and very often less expensive for people to buy as well. And of course, the final example is how we think about building our neighborhoods. More houses on lots. So here again in Texas, the infamous Icon. This company, everybody focuses on the 3D printing aspect of this company. This company is about something that's so much more than this. This company is about material sciences. They're run by a bunch of nerds, right? We all knew nerds would run the world, and now look at, here we are doing it. Okay, so material science. So at Icon, they think carefully about where are we building for. So they build a lot in Texas. They know that in some parts of Texas, you've got to be mindful of hurricanes. In other parts of Texas, you have to be mindful of extreme heat. So you saw this, look at this honeycombing on this house. Honeycombing is a very natural way to make a home more energy efficient. And the materials that are used by those 3D robots to build that home inside of, you can build one of these homes inside of 2 weeks, right? They're intentionally built for whatever the environment is going to be. This company is so respected now that they have been hired to build things on the moon. Because if you understand the environment that you're building for, and you understand how to use robotics in a meaningful way, you can build quickly anywhere. And then finally, an example from Campbell, California. I love this example. In this community, they said, we've got a housing crisis, but the city itself was like, we need other players to come in and help us think about this. So a couple of banks, a couple of faith leaders, and some smart developers kind of came together and said, what could be possible? And they decided on this cottage community, this is their first pilot test, where all the homes are smaller, but they share beautiful, gorgeous green spaces and shared spaces. So it's a different way of thinking about community with a different mix of players. Now, housing as a cure. Based on any fair reading of the facts, if you think about life stage, right? So from our very youngest to our very oldest. And for those of you who have kids, right, or elderly parents, I think we know that there is a lot of loneliness at the two ends of the spectrum. Our kids are having mental health crises, and our elders are intensely lonely. And there's research now, originally out of the UK, I think now also published and tested here, that loneliness is as devastating to a person's life expectancy as smoking. So sometimes, loneliness can shorten a lifespan. Some of these are called deaths of despair, right? So if we start to think about housing as a cure for loneliness, you get things like Nesterly. So Jimmy in Boston, right, our new incoming chair, Nesterly has been chosen by the city of Boston as one of its suite of housing cures. And what is it? It's so simple, it's genius. There are a lot of older homeowners in Boston who've got extra space, empty nesters, elderly homeowners who just can't keep up with all the maintenance, but they also can't afford to sell because they can't afford to buy. So they're stuck. And then you've got all young professionals moving into Boston who would like to live closer to the city, who would like to live in these more established neighborhoods, but there's either nothing to rent or the rents are sky high. So Nesterly strikes a bargain with homeowners who would like some extra help around the house, with young professionals who say, in exchange for a lower rent, I would gladly, teach you the computer. That's what that looks like, right? But I would gladly run your laundry up and down the stairs on a weekend. I will gladly rake, do some light repaint, whatever the case is. Nesterly cannot expand fast enough. I'm interested, does anybody here live in a community where Nesterly is part of the housing solution? Anybody besides Boston? Check it out. Here's my favorite example. This comes from Sälbo, Sweden. This is a large housing innovation. It's called Sälbo, and it's in Sweden. And here's how it works. Half of the private units are for people over age 65 for the loneliness epidemic, and half of the suites are for young people like this gal and her child. Right? And a lot of the younger people who come into Sälbo actually are immigrants. So they may not speak Swedish fluently, they may not know the customs and so forth. So everyone gets sort of a smaller private space. So you get your bedroom and your bathroom and maybe a small kitchen dinette. But the large spaces, the large community spaces, the living room, the game space, the dining space, the kitchen, all of those spaces are larger to promote people spending time together. So how they cook their meals together, how they share their meals together. It's this beautiful intergenerational mix of the very oldest and the very youngest and most fragile coming into a new community. So that is homing, 3 different ways to think about our future. Uptown! I am so bullish on the future of downtowns that I call this Uptown. I am so bullish. And I know some of you are like, Rebecca, have you visited my downtown? It's kind of like this. I get it. The projections are that by 2026, 24% of our Class A commercial office space will be vacant. And that is really impacting a lot of us. But I hope that after this little part of my talk, you feel a little bit more like this about downtown. Jazz hands. All right. In order to talk about the future of downtowns, in order to talk about uptowns of the future, I actually want to go back in time. I know I'm a futurist, but I'm also sort of a history nerd. I'm sort of perpetually fascinated by what is timelessly true. So this is the Grass Market in Edinburgh. Any Scots in the audience? All right. Anybody been to the Grass Market in Edinburgh? Right? Okay, so I use this for 2 reasons. One, because it allows me to tell a hilarious story about hangovers, but also because when you go back to the 1300s and even to earlier, you think about our very first downtowns, they were the center of our civic life. They were the center of our economic life, right? They were so important to our culture. And that's what the Grass Market was. So on Saturday mornings, very early in the mornings, the bakers and the farmers and the furriers and the, those who were butchers would come into the Grass Market and set up, which is very much like what that we have on Saturday mornings in our community. The farmers market, you guys, we have been doing this for hundreds and thousands of years, right? Using our downtowns to come together. Now, the other thing that happened in the Grass Market, I don't know if any of you know a Scot, are a Scot, or love a Scot, but the Scots have a real love affair with alcohol. And it was very common on Saturdays to just get blotto. The hangings happened in the town square on Sundays, when those who had overindulged had headaches, might still have been a little bit drunk, and just weren't at their best. So going to a public hanging after a night of debauchery was called a hangover. This is, it just clicked for you. Yes. So thank you, Scotland, for giving us the hangover as a common word that we now all use. I see some of you still drinking coffee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I heard the margaritas are pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, I heard they're pretty good. Okay, so the Grass Market, our farmers markets, our downtowns, it's timelessly true that these have been gathering places. And what happened in the run-up to the pandemic was that a lot of our downtowns became very homogenous, right? So when there was a shock to white-collar workers for whom downtowns were perfectly set up Monday through Friday, but were dead, maybe Saturdays and Sundays, it really hollowed out our downtowns. So the Uptown experience over the next 10 years, and some of you are already doing this, are gonna really, some of them are gonna go back to basics, but there are gonna be some really cool innovations. The table stakes for an Uptown, the new downtown, is high-speed wireless everywhere. Everyone needs it, so that's table stakes. But then on top of that, how do you program for people who will come and visit, right? So the Chicago Loop Alliance, they set up their Saturdays on State. And in the first weekend, 130,000 people came downtown. We have an innate need to be together, to be a part of something. Over the course of the first few weeks, over 500,000 people came to Saturdays on State. Other inventions that I think we're going to see more of is some of you are moving your colleges and universities and satellite campuses downtown, like this is Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, right? Des Moines has a downtown school, K-8. Maybe it's K-12 now. But the whole idea was, let's put some of the assets and amenities that might not be usual downtown. So tech campuses, high-tech campuses, and so forth. And the final sort of killer app for reinventing your downtown, I think, is to just remove harm. So it's not about doing something new. It might be about going back. So this is the land map of Pasadena, California in 1965. Later in that decade, the powers that be, city government, state government, decided to put a huge culvert into this neighborhood. You know what that looks like to me? That looks like scar tissue. You know, when you see this black and white, it almost looks like an x-ray, like, ooh, what happened there? You know, my friend Charles Landry is a brilliant city maker and city pioneer. And he talks about, you know, when he comes and visits your community, he always wants to have the tour. And Charles talks about yes places and no places. You know, like there are some parks that just feel like yes places, and some that feel like no places. And boy, I look at this image and I'm like, ooh, that is a no place. That is not a yes place. And this culvert sat empty, mostly empty. So imagine this being out your backyard, you know? So the Pasadena neighborhood groups have gotten together and have said, what would happen if we would simply fill the culvert? If we would simply fill the culvert with soil, with trees, with greenery. And you can see how that looks. You can see right where that culvert was, where that culvert would connect. What could our community look like if we put it back together in this way that restores it to its health, just by removing a harm? Y'all, this is Uptown. It is downtown reinvented. Here's the fifth and final trend. I know some of you are right now like on your encyclopedia or your dictionary like, Schismogenesis, what the hell? So we put this is how you pronounce it, Schismogenesis, right? So you guys will all fundamentally understand this. Little audience interaction. Any Green Bay Packer fans in the house? Hello! Okay, oh my God, you guys. Let's all have a drink together. Okay, I'm gonna do the first part, you do the second part. Dun, 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 dun. That's it, okay, so, hey Packers! So I was born in Green Bay. I love the Packers. Woo, you're a shareholder? Wow, I'm so glad you're sitting up front. That is awesome. One of the only professional sports teams you can own a share in. Very cool story with the Green Bay Packers. I'm not going to go all green and gold on you, but one of the things I learned when I started working in the South, like in the SEC conference, this is something I learned in the South. Well, I'm going to pause on that. Why don't we all? It just means more. It just means more. We're going to come to this. So how many of you, if you have a team that you love as much as we love the Packers, on the count of three, shout it out like you mean it. 1, 2, 3. Woo! Awesome. Okay. I really heard the 49ers, I'm not going to lie. You should be the next auctioneer. So strong. Now, when I started to work in the SEC conference, I mean, I didn't know I was necessarily, but one of the things I learned is like, it's not enough for Auburn. It's not enough for Auburn to win. Who must also lose? Alabama. That's right. Right? So now I'm going to do another quick test with the audience. On the count of 3, shout out the team that you freaking hate. On 3, 1, 2. Some of you couldn't even wait for the call. I hate them so much. 1, 2, 3. I was worried this was going to happen. The volume was actually louder for the haterade than it was for the bum, 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 bum. You guys have just proven schismogenesis. Schismogenesis, 2 Latin words put together. Schism, separation. Genesis, sort of the start or the natural beginning of separation. Schismogenesis is about in and out groups. Now, several years ago, this book was written called The Dawn of Everything. And I love this book, but it is a doorstopper, and I'm not going to make you read it. What I am going to tell you is a famous British historian whom I love, British. His children call this Daddy's Orange Bible. It is the most up-to-date history of the last 65,000 years of two-leggeds. 65,000 years of history of two-leggeds, and it's a big, thick buddy, but here's the cut of it. 3 things have united all of us through 65,000 years of human history: sport, slavery. Humans have always oppressed each other. And schismogenesis, the natural human inclination to create in-groups and out-groups. So if you were in a clique in high school, I know I'm going back in time, right? If you were in a clique in high school, that's an in-group and an out-group, right? Some of you remember this commercial.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC.
Is anybody else's marriage pretty much summed up on this slide? I mean, yes, yes. Mine too. Mine too. And this gets wired into us. Schismogenesis gets wired into us. This is my childhood church, St. John's Lutheran Church in West Bend, Wisconsin. And I went to St. John's Lutheran School, but to get there, I had to walk through the parking lot for St. Francis Cabrini Catholic School. So when I would walk to school, all the Catholic kids were like, you know, in the parking lot playing jump rope, waiting for the bell to ring to go into classes. And every day before I left for school, I mean, starting at 5 years old, my mom was like, don't talk to the Catholics. She never told me why. That was a mixed marriage in West Bend. It was a Lutheran and a Catholic marrying each other, right? And now, you know, you hear the stories about the best-selling book this summer in the UK and England is a book about 2 super liberal Labour Party parents whose son announces that they are conservative. Right? They were like, we were ready for trans, we were ready for gay, we were not ready for conservative, right? So what to know about these in-groups and out-groups is that this is deeply within us. This is deeply within us. It is something that makes humans humans. But what is new for us is the amplification. That media and social media knows that if they're going to engage you, they first have to enrage you. Pissed people spend more time watching the news, reading social media. They do, right? And the algorithms are programmed to keep your eyes on the news. or social media, right? So what we now have are, it's really cool on social media to dunk on people, not in this awesome LeBron James way, but it is cool to put people down and punch down, and it's cool to cancel people. And oh my God, if one of our elected leaders crosses an aisle to cooperate, we call them a sellout, and then we'll cancel them. So this enragement, I read a reporter recently who called it the industrial rage machine. This is the world we're living in right now. But here's a corollary truth. Humans are also deeply wired for cooperation. You know this in your bones, because this is one of the things that chambers do so darn well, right? Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, so she's the one who famously said, never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has, right? That's Margaret Mead, famous anthropologist. And she was doing a master's seminar, and one of her students asked her what the first sign of civilization was that Mead ever saw. And this is what she said. The first sign of civilization she ever saw was a human femur, so that's your thigh bone, so you can see the hip joint and the knee, what connects into the knee there. The first sign of civilization she ever saw was a human femur that had obviously been broken and healed. And she went on to explain that this was the first sign of civilization because normally in the animal kingdom, if you are injured in the wild, you will die. Because you will not be able to get to water, you will be preyed on by a predator, you will not be able to get food, you will die. We know this well. So if a human who had a broken femur went on to heal the femur and live longer, it meant someone took care of that person, brought them water, brought them food, helped them until they could make their own way. We are wired for cooperation, but we are also wired for schismogenesis. My entreaty to you as chamber leaders is that you are going to have to, whenever possible, put your thumb on the scale of cooperation, because our better angels, right, are going to need a little bit of a pep talk and a cheerleader. So, as we move into the close here, the future is not a place that we are going to visit. The future is a place that we will create. It's not a place we visit. It's a place we will create. And I love coming to ACCE because you are smart, you are wise, you are strategic, and you are some of the kindest people doing this important work of creating brighter futures in your community. And when I think about all the other things happening, you are in a perfect position. So as the left has moved further left, although now there might be coming back a little bit more, and the right maybe moves farther right, although what it does, when the left and the right separate, what does it do? It creates a big space in the middle for somebody to enter the conversation. And beyond sports teams and religions, what we have as chambers is this wide diaspora. Big businesses, little businesses, startups long established, Republicans, Democrats, right? People who believe all different kinds of things, but in the end know that, good jobs are for everybody. Talent doesn't know, limits or bounds. That if we want a prosperous future for our kids and for their kids, everybody has to grab a hammer. Everybody has to raise a pole on the tent. So, we're in a unique position. I have given you 5 trends from my mindset about how these bigger currents are going to change the fabric of our communities over the next 10 years. My intention is to help make you not just reactive and smart, but to make you wise and proactive about understanding these deeper currents at play. But behind the scenes, for the last several months, has been a series of Horizon 2 task force members who have been asking for your input on the top trends that are going to face the chamber. And right after this, I am going straight downtown. I'm going down to the circuit to pet a puppy, but right after that, I'm going to the Horizon 2 booth, and I hope you'll meet me there, because we've now got it narrowed down to 10 trends that we think are going to impact your chamber, and we want your vote on which of these 10 trends are going to have the most impact on your community and your chamber in the next 10 years. Here are the 10 trends. Who's in to build bolder, ambitious futures? Let's do it. David and I will meet you down at the Horizons booth. Thank you, ACCE24!